we're going to create a rule for the system. And the first thing I like to do to create the rule is define it in English. And the second thing I like to do is find the functions that will apply to this rule. And then the last thing I do is create the rule and combine the operators and the functions together. So to start, let's go ahead and define it in plain English. In English, I could say that I want the COT of market sentiment to be set up long in the last 5 weeks. So I want that to occur in the last 5 weeks. And on top of that, I'd like to have the low price of 2 bars in a row to be above the moving average of 18 bars. And once that is done, that's our condition, we're going to place an action, which will be buy on a stop at the highest high of those 2 bars. Now that I have that written down in English, I can start looking to my next step. My next step is to find what functions will fit this rule. So I go to my trader's toolbox here, which is where we'll find our functions, our rules, and our systems, and where we can create them. Well, first off, COT of market sentiment setup long was already defined in the functions class we did earlier. We called it setup long per COT in market, when the commercials are bullish and the public is bearish. So I can write that function down, setup long per COT market. Another function that I think we'll use is occurrences. So we can write this one down. Occurrences requires the condition, which will be setup market, and how many bars we want to look back. So we're going to look at 5 weeks, right? So 5 bars of weekly. And then it describes this function to return a number of true conditions that occurred for that specific period. So as long as it returns 1 or more, I'm happy. The low function we'll use, the moving average function we'll use, and we'll use the highest high function. Now let's go to the Rules tab, click on New to the right, and we'll start. It automatically says if, because it needs a true or false condition, right? So for our if statement, we'll say if the occurrence, we use occurrences, and now you'll notice it asks for the condition. The condition is another function we created called setup long per COT market. So I hit space bar, and that brings up our list of functions. I start typing setup long. Oh, there it is. Hit enter on that. Place a comma. And you'll notice now it needs to know under occurrences, the second thing we needed to know was how many bars back are we going to look. I'm going to say 5. So we're going to find out if the number of occurrences of the setup per COT and market happened in the last 5 weeks. We'll say this has to return a number. So I'm going to say it had to happen at least 1 time. So it has to be greater than 0. Because greater than 0 is the same as greater than or equal to 1. Now I separate this with an operator. That's not my only condition. I want A and D in there. And I also want the moving average of the close of 18 bars to be less than the low, and I also want the moving average of the close of 18 bars of yesterday. I'm going to put a dot 1. Dot 1 referencing the same function but the prior bar before. So if it was 5-minute bars, it would look 1 bar before. If it was weekly bars, it would look a week before. So we say that has to be less than the low of yesterday. So I do low dot 1 for the bar before. I can verify this as is just to check my first set of work here. And if occurrence is a setup long per this. Now we did say we wanted it of weekly, so after that occurrences function input of 5 bars, I'm going to make sure it knows of weekly by typing of weekly right after it. Verify it, and now I have if the occurrence of the setup long per COT and market sentiment happened in the last 5 bars on a weekly chart, is greater than 0, meaning it happened at least one time, and the moving average of 18 bars is lower than the low, and the moving average of yesterday of 18 bars is less than the low of yesterday, then we're going to move on to our action. Now, we want to buy on a stop, so we can leave the action for a long entry buy, and order type we're going to change to stop order, and buy if the price gets up to the highest high. So I'm going to hit spacebar to bring up my trade sense. There's our highest high function, and it says highest high in the last how many bars. You can see that in the little manila window below, and I'll say I'm going to look in the last 2 bars, close parenthesis, and that's our rule. So if this is true, it's going to buy at the highest high at the last 2 bars. That's our rule. Now we're going to go ahead and save it, and let's just call it entry with a twist. Just something I kind of made up from some of the material I learned, but it's not exactly as taught. I wouldn't recommend it, of course, as I just kind of made it up.